Good morning and welcome to the Pecha Kucha podcast. This morning we have Emily Bond with us. So Emily, welcome to Pecha Kucha.
Thank you.
And I want to start, you've obviously been involved in the TEDx Black Mountain recently, and I want to start about the title. Could you tell me about where did the title for TED, can you explain what the title is first, and then sort of where did that idea for the title come from?
So the title was What Rocket Science Taught Me About Personal Growth. And when I was sort of going through the process of thinking of titles, and obviously you want to think of something that you kind of connect with, because then it's easier to tell that story. I was like, well, I've done a degree in Aerospace Engineering, and I really connected with that and the engineering. And you always hear people say, like, things aren't rocket science. But then it's kind of like, well, what if some things are in a way, and how you think about them? And then obviously through university, moving away from home, there was a lot of personal development that I had to go through, almost whether I liked it or not. And it was a case of then thinking, well, I've gone through both of these journeys now, and obviously personal development is ever evolving, if you want it to be. And I was then like, okay, well, how can I tie these together? And then they sort of just married in principle, sharing very common approaches of, you know, you can either let things define you in engineering and then that process stops, and same with personal development, or you can, you know, decrease like the weight of a rocket and then you get to the different levels. It's the same with like personal development. So they kind of just matched together, and it was something that I felt I could really naturally share that story like through.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I love the bit about that rocket science. You know, it's not rocket science, because I always talk about this concept of growth and setting goals and targets, and you'll always see these lovely illustrations of a nearly like a dartboard and an arrow hitting it, and I always say, well, the reality is it's a moving target.
Yeah.
That personal growth and development is a moving target. It's something in my mid-20s I come to realise, and got on the right path of just always chasing then your personal goals and readjusting and resetting them. Just those subtle adjustments to, I would say, once you've hit it, I talk about this thing, I think it's from the behaviour side of what motivates you. And once you get to a point of achieving that motivation, that the sort of satiation comes, and then you have to go, how do I remotivate myself now? So what's the new target, or where does it move to? And that's very interesting, yeah, that you talk about that. So thinking about the TEDx talk, has anything interesting happened, but from obviously delivering a TEDx? Because as someone that was very much part of that conversation or that project and that event, delivering it and sort of the curation of that, one of my goals was that we elevate some of the local talent that we found and put on the stage. Has there been anything interesting that's happened then since TEDx to today?
Yes, in short, really. The amount of connections and people I've met just on a fundamental level is what has increased the most. And I just love connecting with people and meeting people, because I think everyone has their own story and you can always learn something from someone else. So on that level, it's been profound, and there's like more people I meet every day. And then in terms of actual opportunities, there's quite a few exciting ones coming up, and things that I didn't think I would have the opportunity or be asked to do at such an early stage in kind of my career and life. So I've been asked to do a keynote presentation at a conference that's not in my direct field, but is about sharing that experience and highlighting potential like future leaders and things like that in industry. So I'm quite excited for that. And then I was able to do a reflection piece. So I wrote a blog post for the Queen's Graduate School, which is obviously how I kind of got into this with that partnership in the Pecha Kucha competition. So I was able to reflect on that journey of sort of almost earning that spot, but then sharing that with incoming students who are starting in the new academic year, of how to just make the most of opportunities, and that when you do things, you never really know where they're going to go. And what you sort of put in is what you get out. So it's good to share that, and also have that time to reflect on it myself, of what this journey has even meant for me in the past like 6 months, because it really has like opened up a whole new world to me that I didn't think I would.
That's lovely to hear. And I know we know how you ended up as a TEDx speaker. Maybe our audience don't, and we'll dig a bit in context of that, because explain obviously the competition. Can you also explain what happened at the competition? Because I maybe want to share something with you that you don't know about the competition at the end. So can you just explain to our listeners that what the Pecha Kucha competition was, and like I say, what happened at that for you?
So yeah, it was quite the journey. So the Queen's Graduate School put out like a list of events and things that they run throughout the year, and one of my goals for like the new year was to avoid having that excuse of like, I can't do public speaking, I'm too scared, or, you know, I just can't do it. And I was like, right, I'm going to just throw myself into public speaking this year, whatever comes up. So I saw this list of like mailing list come out from the graduate school, and it had this like TEDx Pecha Kucha thing. And obviously people who know what TED and TEDx is know the significance of it. And I was like, okay, right, this is something I need to just put my name down for. And I have this principle where if something sparks my interest and makes me go, ooh, that could be interesting, I just sign up for it, because I can always change my mind afterwards. So put my name down for it, and they were like, yep, we're running it on this day. And this was like months in advance. And between that time, like all of my work had picked up with what I was doing. So it sort of went slightly to the back of my mind of like, okay, this is in the calendar, but I've got other stuff that's like coming through now. So I did my slides, and I actually sent them in just past the deadline, but they were taken in anyway. So I showed up on, I think it was a Friday, to do the Pecha Kucha competition. So that was obviously between TEDx yourselves and then the graduate school. And yeah, it was a very weird series of events. So they had the lineup, and I was supposed to be 7th, which was, they would do the first 6, have the break, and then I was due to be after the break. So I was like, right, mentally I'm ready for this. And then one of the participants was delayed in traffic, and I was like, she showed up before her slot, and I was like, oh, they'll just fill her back in where she was meant to go. But then they popped her to the end of the line, which meant I got moved up to slot 6, and I was like, right, okay, now I've got to like readjust. So I think it was Donna who was like calling the speakers up when it was their turn. She was like, oh, you know, Emily, like, it's your go. And I was like, I thought I was meant to be after the break. And she was like, oh, no, we moved you up because one of the other participants was late. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, is that okay? And I was like, well, it'll have to be. I'm here now. So she pops my slides up, and I get ready to do my presentation, which is in the form of Pecha Kucha, which is 20 slides and then 20 seconds a slide. So I was like, right, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I know that this is my story, so I can just do it. So I started, and it was all going well. I was quite happy with like the pace I was going at, and that I was matching the slide pace and the story I was trying to tell. And then I turned around, and the screen was blue, and my slides had just gone, and I was like, where have they gone? And I sort of paused for a minute, and I was like, are they going to come back? Is this just a little glitch? And then, yeah, they didn't come back, as you know and you saw. And I was like, right, I've got 2 choices here. I can either just try and like fumble the ending and just bring it together really quickly, and not close the story off and do it justice for what I was saying. Or I can just take a breath and know that I know my story, and I can see that story in my head, and now it's up to me of how I communicate that so that the audience can keep seeing that story. And so I took a breath, and then I was like, right, the slides aren't there, so I may as well just turn forward. And I just kept talking. And because that story was so natural to me, like we'd talked about before, and that connection, it just was so easy to say in a way. And then, yeah, I sort of finished it. I don't know how long it actually took for the last, but I think it sort of matched up to where I was supposed to be. And then, yeah, we had the rest of the talks, and they were all incredible and inspiring in their own ways. And then we had the results, and we all stood at the front. And I was just so honoured to be stood up there with everyone else. And going into that evening, I had no expectations that anything would come out of it. I was like, right, I'm just going to do some public speaking, grow my own experience, and prove to myself again that I can do something that I didn't think I could do. And then they were doing the talks and everything. And then obviously they announced that I had won it. And I was just flooded with so much emotion and just gratitude, and all the speakers just came around me, and you could see and really feel that community in that moment, even though we'd only met each other an hour before. And it was just an incredible evening. And then, yeah, me and my friend went for a drink afterwards, and we're like, what has just happened?
It's very interesting because I love that bit about community and that sense of people having not lost, having been part of something. And I think that's why I love TEDx, and it's why I wanted to create TEDx as I did. And I think that part of just bringing people together and working together to achieve something. But it was a very interesting evening because you were speaking about failure and your experience of how growth comes from failure. And I think that was, as the slides were going, and then I noticed the AV before I think you did, it dropped out. And I'm looking at this, and we had a very specific criteria. And as somebody that works in the education environment and facilitates some lessons to assessors to explain how you should assess and things, and one of the things I always talk about is your objective is to assess against the criteria. You're not supposed to pitch people against each other. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that if somebody presents an assignment to me and it's exceptional, and somebody else gives me another assignment, it's maybe on paper not as good, my job is not to assess it against that paper. My job is to assess it against the criteria, and you're just scoring against that. And so we had a very specific criteria, and we'd gone through it, and I'd scored it, and just at the point of where the AV dropped out, you were leading that scoring category. And then the AV went out, and I thought, right, what's going to happen here? Are we going to stop? Are we going to go again? But what actually happened was you pushed through, you continued. And when I talk about storytelling, as you were talking, I was visualizing what should have been on that screen. And a couple of months later, whenever you sent me the slides, I got the pictures that were in my head within reason. So I was thinking, I can remember her saying that, and there was no slide, but actually that's what I was thinking about whenever she was saying that. So what it showed was the power of your storytelling. But at the end of that event, we were sitting as a group of judges, and I went into my mode of criteria and assessment, and I says, right, we have, because the competition was fierce, and as a curator or as a leader in any environment, I always say the job of people that are working alongside you or trying to present to you is to make my job hard. That's what I want. I want you to make me make hard decisions. And we had this very difficult decision because we had outstanding performance. I think we were looking at 1 or 2 point fluctuations across everything. And I turned around and said to the rest of the judges that there was a couple coming very close to each other, and then we were having a conversation about the story. And I said, right, the first thing you need to do is get rid of that sympathy vote. Of everything that we do tonight is that Emily's not winning this because of the sympathy of the AV crashing. Emily wins this on the basis of that she told the best story. So then we had a conversation around some what we class as the 3 strongest things, and all 3 of us went Emily, Emily, Emily. So it was about that once you'd eroded that, it didn't matter because the story was still there and the timing was still there. So congratulations on that, and it was exceptional. So yeah, I think that's something maybe that you didn't know that I had visualized, and then you sent me the slides, and I was going, that's good. That's good storytelling. So very, very well done. And I think you carried that through to the TED Talk because, while the TED Talk was nearly a carbon copy of what you'd done, I thought it had improved as well. Very, very. So I thought I loved the lab coat and things, the slight additions to that. So I thought that was exceptional.
Little metaphors
yes.
in. Yeah.
Lovely. Going forward, then, you're currently doing a PhD at the moment. Could you tell us a bit about what the PhD is and what your research is at the moment?
So my PhD focuses on doing experimental and modelling of lightweight materials and protective coatings in extreme temperatures for the transport sector, which is a lot of words. But basically I set different materials and protective coatings on fire and see what happens. And
Every schoolboy's dream.
Yeah. And then I compare them to industry standards to see whether we can get more efficient systems. Because obviously if you've got like a vehicle or something that's lighter, it's more efficient, but you need to obviously make sure it's still safe. And then I try and model it on a computer. So it's like coding with like Python and Fortran, which is 40 odd years old. So yeah, that's kind of what I do.
What's the purpose of that then in terms of real world application? Is there an end objective for you and the project, and like is it to look at fire retardants or things like that in the future, or battling anything in particular?
So there's sort of, being the ambitious person that I am, there's sort of two streams of things that I would like to do with it, because I always think that research should never be done for research's sake. It should be done to contribute something, even if it's a method that doesn't work, because then it means that someone doesn't do that again and they can focus on something else. So for me, it's in general, again, connecting with people, but also trying to make an impact in industry to improve safety. So whether that's working with like the fire service, especially with the evolution of batteries and electric vehicles, and improving knowledge there on how to manage them in a safer way, because at the moment there just isn't as significant enough procedures and approaches on how to deal with them safely when they do go off. And then likewise is then looking actually at industry application before that of making better systems. So I'm looking at sort of developing sort of a software model where you can basically put a system in, bring in whatever fire type you're working with, so whether it's a battery fire, jet fire, petroleum fire, because they perform so differently, essentially making it modular, and then you can almost plug and play and then see what is likely to happen with the system that you've created and compare it to standards of, okay, do I need to increase the thickness? Do I need to put a different material additive in? Or is this system just not going to work for what we need?
It's very interesting that about, you were talking about batteries there and obviously electric cars, because it's very, I was reading an article there only this week, around how rechargeable batteries going on flights and the volatility of them, that Emirates have banned the use of them on a flight. You can still take them on a flight, but you're not allowed to plug a phone into them anymore, because across the industry they've noticed a lot of spikes in volatility of batteries and stuff like that.
Yep.
Does that, I suppose, what you're trying to get to is reduce the risk in those situations, especially with electric cars? Because I don't know an awful lot about it, but I am aware that they're very difficult to put out by the emergency services. So if a car goes on fire, it's much more challenging to put out as a fire because they reignite and things like that.
Yeah, so it's more focusing on the containment systems of itself rather than the actual battery chemistry, because that's a whole different field. Because even within batteries, you'll have dividers and separators, and there's a lot of research in that area of how to, if one cell within the battery goes off, to stop it propagating through the rest of the battery. Because at the moment, once one part of the battery goes, there's no way of stopping really the proper propagation, which is then what happens when you see the cars go on fire. And the only way they can really do it at the moment is to just put the car in a body of water and leave it for a couple of days. But then you've also got to decontaminate the water afterwards. So
it's just not
not
putting it out. Again, moving on, and I know you're a big advocate for self-care and well-being. Can you tell me a bit about what you're trying to do in that space, or what you are doing, and what I suppose, what your vision is for that in the future?
So yeah, I think, and I do think that was came across in my TED talk and my TEDx talk, with that journey, and like I said, being on that personal development and realizing like self-care is not something that's a luxury, like it's an absolute necessity, because without you can't meet the people you want to meet, you can't do the things you want to do. But it's also known that self-care comes in a million different ways, because we're all so different as people, and self-care is different between people, but even different for different stages of our lives. Self-care for me, obviously when I was younger, is different to what it is now, and it will be different when I'm older, probably in some way. So as well as doing my PhD, I'm sort of trying to create a bit more of an initiative and on a mission to, I guess, create more care, community, and sort of connection between people, realizing how valuable each of those three components is. So I have a brand called Amarla at the moment, which loosely translates to like love it or love her. And it sort of just embodies those three kind of core things again, so that care, connection, and community. And my sort of vision for it is just to keep operating off them. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like right now, but it's just about how to translate that to different groups and connect with those different groups in society. So whether it's university students and working with them on practically how to approach, exam stress, or move into a new place, and continuing that self-care and evolution through their journey alongside, the academics they're obviously working on, or whether it's working with a group of females on understanding, the different like menstrual cycles, things like that. So I've just had actually some PMS journals delivered, which I co-designed with an illustrator back home. So I'm very excited actually to sort of put them to use and see the impact of them.
So it's like trying to come up with that concept of aligning product with face-to-face interactions and stuff, is it? So you want to not only create that community connections, like bringing people together, but also giving them a tool to maybe
continue using Yeah,
it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and it's not then just another product that they buy.
Yeah.
They can then connect with it, have that experience, and hopefully use it.
I talk about, so a lot of the work I do in some of the professional fields would be from a behavioural analysis point of view. And one of the things I talk about, maybe the difference between pure psychology and what I talk about, is the impact of environment on performance. Is where I spend most of my time, and that integrates well-being into that as well. But it's about that, how do you get a community connected and working together? Because I often say a lot of the challenges we see in society, whether they be just people feeling depression and maybe addictions and things like that, we maybe look at people and make judgments about them, that they're maybe homeless and living on the street. But usually, I would say a lot of the time, those addictions come as a coping mechanism of that. It's not pre, it's usually post those events. So I say, and it's because maybe they've lost a connection. They're no longer connected to, whether it's family, society, and the best way around that is finding ways to reconnect them. And like you say, that's different for everybody. What is reconnection and what does that look like? And that's the challenge. But like, I love what you're talking about there in terms of the work that you're trying to do. So best of luck with that going into the future, and we'll keep an eye on that story. You maybe have to come back next season, and we'll see how you're getting on with that. So Emily, as our first guest on this new series, last season we had a thing called the ChatGPT question, where we literally fed all your information into ChatGPT and says, what would be the perfect question for this individual? So every season we're going to try and come up with something a bit quirky, and I thought, we have a rocket scientist coming on. So you're going to live the legacy of all these series, because we have the Emily question, and it's going to remain the Emily question throughout the episodes. And it's a bit of fun. Remember the program Room 101? What will you put into Room 101? So what better way maybe to finish, then ask the rocket scientist, if you could put one thing in space, what would it be and why?
Now that's one hell of a question. And my brain is already immediately thinking of like everything and going through like, well, would this practically work? Like, what are the conditions in space? Like, would this actually like come out with a good like outcome, or is it just kind of redundant? Because, you know, like if you light a match, you're like, oh yeah, you did that, but.
But I suppose the thing is, would you put it up there for a good reason or a bad reason then, is the first thing you have to come up with. Am I putting it up there to have a, because I don't like it, or do I want to put it up because it'll have a good effect up in space?
Well, like I wouldn't put anything living, I don't think, obviously, because it's pretty harsh conditions up there, just like to throw anything living up there. I just think part of it would just be funny to just put like a little cactus or something just floating around in space, and it's just like you could put like a little hat on it or something, and it's just there, just existing as a cactus, where it's like it's not doing any bad or any good, it's just there.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting conversation at the Hubble telescope.
It's like, why is there a
I've just
cactus?
spotted. Yeah, I think I've just spotted a new planet. Looks a bit like a cactus. Yeah, very, very interesting.
So yeah, probably something like that. Or if I could put more of a concept, or like, I guess it's a slightly non-tangible thing, I'd put like gravity in space and just see where everything went.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, what happens when you put gravity in space?
Because obviously everything's just like there and has its own like magnetic like pulls and fields and how it like moves. And
now, you know what you have everybody doing at this time of moment? Typing into ChatGPT, what happens when you put gravity into space? What would the world look like?
Yeah.
Or the atmosphere look like in terms of what's happening up there? So
just take the vacuum out as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Emily, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And as I said, good luck with everything that you're doing. Absolutely delighted that TEDx has maybe elevated what your future holds for you in terms of your speaking. And I know that's something that you want to get more of. So anybody listening, if you're looking at a speaker, and I promise you, unbelievable storyteller, start by jumping over to TEDx and watch Emily's TEDx talk, and you'll see what you're going to get. So yeah, definitely there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for you. But then really good luck with the self-care stuff, and we want to keep an eye on that with you. And good luck as well with you finishing your studies. How long's that now? You've still
So I'm just coming up to a year, so I've got about 2 years left.
2 years.